Hi and welcome. I'm sure that we all have seen the tragedy that happened in the USA, and also seeing that, there was something in all our hearts that really triggered a sense of compassion, a sense of anger, of different emotions. And I believe that one of the key aspects in all of this is that the issue of racism. And we may point towards a certain group of people, we may point towards a certain nation, but I believe the reality is that all of us in our hearts, we need to look deep within to see if there's even a small iota of racism. What I want to do today is to really go into the Word of God and look at some principles in how Jesus dealt with racism. Now, during his time, there was quite a lot of racism. Firstly, the Jewish nation was under Roman rule. And so there was oppression, there was pressure from the Romans, and there was tension between the Jews and the Romans. Secondly, we read how the Jews and the Samaritans had tension. The Samaritans and the Jews did not eat together. In fact, the Jews always thought that the Samaritans were a lower class. And historians even believe that the tension was so great that there was one year where the Samaritans came and threw bones of dead animals in the temple in Jerusalem, and that year they could not celebrate Passover. So that was a huge tension. Then also there's the tension between the Jews and the Gentiles. The Jews believed that they did not have any responsibility towards the Gentile population. And so just imagine living in such a culture of so much of tension between different cultures, races, nationalities. And so in the midst of all that, Jesus arrives. And I would like us to look at John chapter 4, because it's one of my favorite stories in the scriptures, in how Jesus deals with A, a woman, B, of someone of a different race, and how he brings worth and value into her life. So John chapter 4, and right at the beginning, in verse 3, it says how he left Judea and departed again for Galilee, and Jesus chose to go through Samaritan country. Verse 4 tells us that, and he had to pass through Samaria. Some of the translations say he needed to go through Samaria. Just think about it. Jesus, on purpose, chose to go through Samaritan country. Jesus was born a Jew, and a Jew with 12 other men and maybe a couple of women with him. They chose to go through Samaria. The average Jew would not travel or would prefer not to have gone through Samaritan country. They would not have stopped to eat somewhere where Samaritans had made the food. But the first principle is really Jesus chose to go through Samaria. He made a conscious decision to say, I want to go. I need to go. So there was a need in the heart of Jesus. So I would even ask myself, as I ask you, do I have a need to go into a different country? Or do I have a need to cross over and go to a group of people that do not look like me, that don't speak my language, that does not have my skin color, that may be totally different to my cultural perspectives, would I have a need to go into such a place? I truly believe Jesus needed to go because he wanted to bring a blessing. See, if we live with the intention of, I want to bring a blessing to my brother who is so different to me, what a different world we will live in. Rather than rejection and a demeaning perspective, we will be having a loving perspective. And so as they go, it was around noontime, and Jesus, I believe very cunningly, sent the disciples to get some food. And he was seated at this well. It was Jacob's well. And, Jesus knew that there was someone who was going to come to that well. And this lady comes at 12 noon. Now, even culturally, you do not go to the well at 12 noon. In the Middle East, you do not travel around at 12 noon. You're inside your house being shaded from the sun. But she came that day because she was struggling with certain things. She was struggling with her own life. She had married so many men. Her marriages had ended up, broken. And, she was looking for love. She was looking for worth. And so in the midst of all this, she becomes also a social reject. So we can see another aspect into that dynamic of racism. But now it's like within your own society, within your own culture, you are looked down upon because you don't measure up to what your culture or your society expects you to be. And so this lady comes and she sees Jesus, and Jesus, she's drawing water, and Jesus immediately tells her, "Give me a drink." And she gets surprised. She's taken aback because immediately her response is, "How is it that you, being a Jew, asks me for a drink of water? I am a woman of Samaria. Samaritan women don't give Jews a cup of water." Why? Because even the cup that she would touch will become unclean according to the religious ritual. And so therefore the Jew would not even touch that because he considered her of no value. And Jesus shocks her. He shocks her and says, "Give me some water." Now, I believe Jesus is doing something here, which I believe is another principle that we need to embrace. He is establishing value over this Samaritan woman. He is establishing value over her and saying, "The cup of water that you give me, I will treasure it. I will receive it. I will simply receive it because I need you to serve me." Wow, I need you to serve me. See, within our cultures, we can build up those walls. We can think, hey, you know what? I'm not going to receive anything from them. I don't like their food. I don't want to have water from them, or whatever. But here's Jesus establishing value. He is not lecturing her. He is not saying this is wrong with you, that is wrong with you. All that he's saying is you are valuable. And I believe that is that second principle of would we establish value over someone who's different to us and say, what you do for me is valuable, is precious. Imagine when someone hears that from you, that you are valuable. See, immediately for the woman, she sees cultural differences. She sees racism. She sees racism because that's what she responded with. See, if we only see racism, That's all that we're going to see. But we need to see the gift of God. We need to see that each one of us is a gift that God has given. Another clear aspect that what we see even between the conversation between Jesus and the woman was that Jesus never spoke down to her. Jesus never criticized her, but he was always affirming her. He was always lifting her up. He was always giving her value. And I believe that is such an important principle, that as we cross the line of our ethnicity to another, it is our responsibility to give them value, but to lift them up, to affirm them, to encourage them. Because Jesus, he raised the level of women. Society had pushed them down, but Jesus gave them value. Another way that Jesus really dealt with racism is through the Great Commission. If you carefully read it, it says, go into all the world, not just your own world, not just your own tribe, but he said, go into all the world and make disciples, teaching them, what I have taught you. And all the world means all the world. It doesn't mean that we have to be segregated or we are to be isolated, but it means that I am to go beyond my own culture. I am to go beyond my own people. Because remember, at the beginning I said how the Jews did not have a responsibility towards any other nation. So Jesus changes that 180-degree turn, and he says, now you are responsible for the entire world. You are responsible for the Jew, for the Gentile, for the Samaritan, for the Greek, for every nationality. And so we must step beyond our own cultural boundaries if we are serious with the Great Commission, because Jesus wants me to reach out to another culture with the good news, with the love of God. Even Peter had issues of racism. He had issues where in the book of Acts, chapter 10, the story of Cornelius. Cornelius was not a Jew, but the Lord had to deal with Peter so that when Cornelius sent his people, Peter would go without any questions. And he would see some amazing things that God would do in a culture that they thought that God would not move in. Don't be surprised when you see God moving in another culture. Don't reject that. Don't criticize that, but embrace that. Embrace that. And learn from that culture. See, we can learn from one another. We can learn from each other if we will only listen, if we will only value, if we will only love, and if we will reach out to one another. And he began to win the trust of this woman in their conversations. He did not judge her. And to me, that's the third principle. We stop judging. We stop condemning. It's so easy that within my own culture, I can say, hey, you know what? This is what life should be. Look at that culture. Every culture is unique. There are good things in my own culture, but there are also things that are not so good. But we hold on to what is good, and we also hold on to and appreciate someone else's culture. See, unity is not that we all look alike, but unity is to say, I celebrate that you're different to me. I celebrate our differences. I rejoice that you are different to me because you're different and I'm different. And when we come together, we make things perfect in unity. That's what unity is. It's celebrating that I am diverse to somebody else. And this story is an amazing story. This lady runs to her community and says, "Come and meet the man who told me everything about my life." Who would ever do that? Why? Because her shame was lifted off. Her condemnation was lifted off. She didn't care anymore because Jesus established value. He established and told her, this is who you really are. And when she began to understand that, she did not care what people thought about her. She did not care that she was a social reject anymore. She now became someone who was going to bring others to Christ. She even forgot her jar of water. She left it and ran. She was so excited. Friends, we need to be like Jesus to those who are different to us. Am I ready to cross over my boundary of being Sri Lankan and British into another person's area? Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to go all the way? Am I willing to reach out and bring value to those who are different to me? Am I willing to stop condemning, but to start embracing? And if I'm saying yes to all that, what a better place our world is going to be, where we can begin to be humanity that God created us to be. Because His love is unconditional. Nothing can separate us from His love. And therefore, nothing should separate His love flowing from me to someone else. Nothing should separate that. Nothing should be the barrier for me to receive God's love, but then for me to be a channel of God's love to someone who's different. So I pray that that the Lord would have spoken to you something through this video, because we need our hearts to change. We need our hearts to be impacted by the love of God. We need our hearts to say, I value you. I honor you. I need you. I will serve you. And we will see the response that comes. And that will be amazing. Because if everyone begins to do that, we'll be kind of fighting to serve each other. But we will be living a culture of honor. Honoring brothers and sisters of a different ethnicity, race, language, nationality. Because heaven is going to be full of different people. Everyone is not going to look the same. Revelation chapter 5 says that there were people from every tribe, every nation, every language who's going to be worshiping God. And so let's learn how to do that here on the earth before we even get to heaven. So God bless you and have a wonderful day. And I pray that the Holy Spirit would have spoken as much as He did to me through this story, that He would have spoken to you as well. God bless you.